there's going to be a massive power deficit coming up at peak season, especially if it's cooler, which it's forecast to be, from now, middle of December, all the way through middle of February, late January. It's going to be an absolute economic collapse. For months, it's going to lock up in Europe. Oh, wait, that could be a possible catalyst for a worldwide financial collapse, bringing in central bank digital currencies. The food shortages will be alleviated by a digital rationing card. But I'm sorry, you can't have the digital rationing card until we get this new system of central bank digital currency on the blockchain to make sure there's no fraud, immutable, non-changeable, and we can do it in real time to understand where the food supply is. We care about you so much. We want to understand where every calorie of food is in the supply chain in real time. Just because we care, we want to make sure you get your calories so your kids don't starve. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Brighty on TV, David Dubine here from Adapt 2030. We've seen our world slowly unravel with the disconnection of supply chains, the liquidation of finance and industry, constriction of crops, food prices rising. So what does 2023 hold for us? Because you can clearly see that it's a game plan and we're moving from point A to point B. So if you know where point B is in the future, we can just trace our steps back as to what's the trajectory, forecasting out for just trends, general trends for 2023. You can get more granular on data. So just coming into the break, I ran out of time on this last slide here, but I wanted to frame it for this next, segment of the show here. Projections versus real world don't work anymore. Like there's things that we're starting to find out that projections and real world disconnected back in 2020 or 2021. So mechanisms that we used to use when supply chains were fully functional, you were going to have to start thinking and forecasting in a different manner. Because this is a perfect case in point here. They would have you believe, the EIA, that somehow in the United States, we are going to construct multiple other biodiesel refineries and ethanol production facilities. And what we see right now, I can't even get a part for my heat pump because the supply chains from China have broken. And they're expecting us to come out with milled steel products and everything else from A to Z. It was difficult enough and would take 5 to 7 years to put one of these plants out at the best of times with fully functional supply chains. But look at it, they want to run this up from 22 to 24, and they're like, oh, wait a second. They're going to try to bring all this online in 2 years. That's nearly a 7x increase if you take it from the baseline where it is at existing capacity at 50 plus the plan plus the under construction. Look at these impossibilities. And the same thing with the forecasting. I was looking at the WASDA, that's the World USDA grain forecast and whatnot today, earlier on the November. And I'm looking at that saying their projections out for 2023 are nearly identical to what it is now, not taking into consideration anything volcanic aerosol related for the Southern Hemisphere. Deutsche Bank, Citi, and Morgan Stanley are all forecasting another 25% plunge in the stock market. The only break in inflation is with a recession. Now, 80% of retirees are concerned about inflation and very concerned about the stock market. Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki said, I believe the economy is in the biggest bubble in history. Kiyosaki bought more gold, predicting $3,000 an ounce in a year. Think about it. 2008, the stock market and housing market crashed. Meanwhile, gold went from $800 an ounce to $1,600 over the next 2 years. This could be why Kiyosaki is forecasting $3,000 an ounce. Billionaire economists agree on two things. We're heading toward a recession, and investors need to buy gold. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold, and you may qualify for the No Fee for Life IRA. On qualifying rollovers, give them a call, 888-546-7020. Tell them Adapt 2030 sent you. They're going to give you some great service and also an investor guide. Keep in mind, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer 6 years in a row. 888-546-7020. Remember, there is a risk of loss, and past performance is not indicative of future returns. And now on with the video. It's just baffling. Like, this is so in your face right now. I cannot believe it's not one of the more talked about world events, because they're talking about scraping an enormous amount of food supply, soybean oil for this ag diesel, the renewable diesel. But here, the EPA just finalized using canola seed or rapeseed oil for new biodiesel oils. Because here's the thing, people like me were saying, yo, you can't take our soybean crop and crush it and put it into gas tanks, when a lot of people need that for animal feed, or they need to eat it as a food staple, exports. What about the corn? I know it's dent corn, it's GMO, but there are an enormous amount of acres that could provide better nutrition for us that are put into ethanol production. Now, there's only a certain amount of acres in the United States or in Canada that's already been utilized, pretty much the best lands. Now we're going to play this, switcheroo game here as the year without a summer commences on our grow seasons. They'll already have been whacked at the knees in the Southern Hemisphere with their production, so they'll figure it out pretty quickly where things are growing or not. And if it comes around year number 2, the world as you understand it will actually cease to function in the way that things are interconnected at the moment. They're going to disconnect intercontinental basis, and we're going to see that everywhere across the planet. That's why I keep talking about these fiat currencies. They're linked to a global system right now. They're going to delink, and they're going to come into a central bank digital currency system, which allow you to buy, sell, trade your canola, renewable fuel standard diesel. Oh, but you can only exit the city twice a month. Okay. So we're looking at these kind of prices already. This is for, right around the Thanksgiving time. Luckily, we got a break here. $209 for that 4 kilogram, which is approximately 8 pounds. That's in northeastern Canada in the Maritimes. Look at these prices, $204 for some steaks. Really? Come on, man. Meat, it's getting a little ridiculous. But if it goes to these prices globally, you have to realize what would the repercussions be. And we are on a slow train, soon to be heading downhill with gravity toward these prices. So then they have lab-grown meats. Now, you've heard about lab-grown meat because I was just talking about beef, but USDA just approved lab-grown chicken. Yummy. The menu's expanding. Lab-grown chicken next. Lab-grown beef. Wonder if they'll have lab-grown crickets eventually. Who knows? But the USDA is now moving toward lab-grown pork. So you can see if we can't produce it on the farm, they're going to try to replicate it using cells in a petri dish. But my whole thing is, where's the initial inputs coming? If you're going to try to bring it to the volumes of meat consumed on the planet today, there just isn't enough inputs in their raw form, except the animal. The tech doesn't exist. The processing facilities are not even remotely, maybe 1/5 of 1/8 of 1,000th of 1% of what it would need to go to full production to feed the planet that way we that consume proteins right now. Another fanciful. Yeah, okay. I would imagine even at the run at the end of the famines and everything, there would be way less than 1% of lab-grown meats will still be even viable in 26 or 2027. And just say, you know what, this affects all of us. We all eat. My children eat. My grandmother eats. I eat. My wife eats. My husband eats. Whatever. Because what they're doing now is restricting fertilizer usage in Germany. So they're looking at a 40% decline in German production next year. Or is it a convenient excuse to explain away the year without a summer cooling that would limit crop production 40, 50, 60% anyway? I balance a few of these things in my head when I'm looking through it, because I have all these data points from past historical events and what we see in real play time now. And my look at lens is, how will governments distract from this or explain away the events? Reframe it and look at it in that direction. So how would they explain away a 40% loss of German agriculture? You can't without raising an enormous amount of, how'd that happen? Let's investigate further. And then there's a lot more questions and a lot more things released than possibly they would want to have that conversation out in the open. But look at it now. Okay, Germany lost 40%. France will be down 40%. Netherlands, look what's happening over there. They're closing all the farms. Oh, it'll explain away the reduction of agricultural production, which means less food, which means higher prices, less food. Don't look at the eruption. Do not look at that year without a summer thing. We have an excuse for everything blanket across to explain away why your foods are disappearing. Factory fires, okay. Closing down energy facilities that produce then our chemicals that then give us the fertilizers. So now they got a double whammy excuse. It's the fertilizer production, natural gas, we couldn't get the inputs. Oh, and we got energy rationing and energy shortages, so we couldn't run the plants to produce the fertilizer. That's why Germany's going to cut 40%, and that's why they're not going to have an additional 40% of your corn, wheat, and other crops, sorghum, millet, that they normally grow. Where does that leave us? They're trying to explain away every food shortage across the planet as natural means when it's all linked to the same event. And it's quirky that it's coming up in the same exact overlapping time frame of the intensity onset of these grand solar minimum cycle. So then we come into the energy shortages. So where do you expect energy shortages to be? Again, it's a general trend. Forecast it out. This will be an explanation as to even less fertilizer production across Europe, which will lead to greater shortages in other countries because they don't have the fertilizer. Now, if you can wind this back into, you don't want to tell a general populace that we just had a volcanic eruption that's the biggest in 200 years. Oh, by the way, that cycle was forecastable 20 years ago. And the onset of these events is an electrical discharge on our planet's crust, which creates more volcanism. Gee. Then you're talking about electrogravitics and different coupled electromagnetic fields. Wait, the sun drives our climate on the planet? They're interconnected electrically? No way. Yes way. Forecastable. And with the volcanic eruptions, which always accompany these cycles, you would expect to have a VEI 6 or 7 eruption that would impact and dent food production. But to tell the populace they would have stopped investing, they wouldn't obey the rule of law, I know there have been a lot of problems with that. But here, Switzerland facing unprecedented power shortages. They're even contemplating bans on electric vehicles. Now here's something, Germany powered estimate. I want to stay with Germany here because I can also predict an economic collapse coming up in January in Germany because they went to their renewables. I know they've turned back on a few of their thermal plants, but if you look at the general trend, left side on this chart here is the combined power generation of Germany. Now, when you look over to the middle of December into January 2019 and the same replicated declines in 2020, where do they drop off? The solar drops out, which reduces their overall production rate around the middle of the month, which we're coming into until the end of February. So you could see that they just literally won't have enough power based on their needs and their production levels at the moment. Some of these things are quite easy to see, and then they'll have an explanation as to why. But if this is Denmark, UK, and France combined, you'll see the same power dropout profile coming around, say, late December, January, February. The production levels drop out because their solar is not there. And this year's wind is off a little bit. Supply chains are constricted. Look at natural gas, that light blue, subtract that out of there this year too. So, we're coming into other variables that won't exist, but we can overlap and now subtract that. There's going to be a massive, massive power deficit coming up at peak season, especially if it's cooler, which is forecast to be from now, middle of December, all the way through middle of February, late January. It's going to be an absolute economic collapse. For months, it's going to lock up in Europe. Oh, wait, that could be a possible catalyst for a worldwide financial collapse, bringing in central bank digital currencies. They need it. That's the plan. We're going there some way, shape, or form. You're going to get drugged there whether you want to or not. What is the mechanism that has to be all-encompassing? It's going to be food shortages and an economic collapse. The food shortages will be alleviated by a digital rationing card. But I'm sorry, you can't have the digital rationing card until we get this new system of central bank digital currency on the blockchain to make sure there's no fraud, immutable, non-changeable, and we can do it in real time to understand where the food supply is. We care about you so much. We want to understand where every calorie of food is in the supply chain in real time just because we care. We want to make sure you get your calories so your kids don't starve, provided you use the new central bank programmable money that we can erase at any time. But some way they're going to get you there, and they're going to be it's going to combine food and economic collapse. Not going to be one. It's going to be both at the same time. So how close are we? I'm not sure exactly. I won't forecast that direct into that month. France, National Electric Grid chief says energy shortage, rationing likely this winter. Okay, France, the economy. Okay, German economy going to go. France's economy also heading. The UK, we know we were talking about energy rationing there too. So everywhere you look across the Eurozone, they're rationing everything. There's no possible way that that economy can function in any way, shape, or form as it did prior. None. Down here in South Africa, they've already run out of fuel, so they're looking for emergency funding to try to get the diesel. And this is their power provider, Exxon. It's happening everywhere on the planet you look at. Don't mind us, we're just burning hundreds of gallons of jet fuel, running a helicopter to de-ice the clean energy wind turbines that aren't spinning or generating electricity because they shut down in cold and Arctic temperatures. Oh, by the way, are we heading into Arctic temperatures in the coldest part of the year in Germany and the Eurozone? Yes, we are. These don't function very well, nor does the solar, and they're out of natural gas. Which brings us to the economy. Venezuela, they're making street puppets and sellable things for tourists out of their currency. Now, see, I would have loved to got one of those in Zimbabwe with a $100 billion note because those notes are quite collectible now. But it's gone from the point of being Venezuela, oil-rich, one of the most prosperous nations on the planet, to making tourist vendor sellables out of the former currency. This is going to happen globally, so bring it. How do you know there's signals and signs out there? Well, CBDCs are going to be brought in. Nigeria, they're limiting the ATM, like physical cash withdrawals, so you move over to the digital system. You're being forced. Now, $45 a day now, it might go down to $10 a day or something. But you see, they're barely giving you the second choice. Like $45 a day, who can operate on $45 a day? Moving you into the new digital system. And then BlackRock says, get ready for a recession/depression unlike any other. And they're talking thousands of years. If you read into the article, they go back to the Roman era, which it would make sense to have a collapse of that proportion. So Aladdin and their forecasting software is talking the largest crash in human history, happening beginning now in December, rolling through the rest of the year in through 2023. And this is, I think, somewhere that the central bank digital issuance will come out. And the same thing that I was saying earlier is they've pegged on some of the same research that the way we used to forecast and do modeling won't work any longer. Everything's so broken and discombobulated and disconnected now that old systems, the way that it used to forecast out economic activity or whatnot, growth of plants, movement of grains across the planet, it just doesn't work anymore because it's so, like I say, a broken fashion of itself. So it just doesn't fit. It's like square peg, round hole now. But you can start to see the signs are all around us. And central banks, they're jumping back on gold too. If you look at that V recovery there, they're piling on the gold. But again, you need it with a new gold-backed currency. So I had word from a friend of mine who lives over in Cyprus, was telling me that there are hearing rumors of they're going to issue 1,000 notes of the new denomination of the gold-backed currency, this BRICS currency for a better term. They're going to do 500 notes and 1,000 notes. And you're going to be able to take that example, 1,000 brick note, and put it on the counter of participating banks and get a piece of physical gold back over the counter. This is the direction they're taking it, just like America was pre-1933. They need to accumulate the gold to get the faith in the currency to start, because I want that gold, especially if it's going to be backed with oil and grains and the largest grain producers on the planet. You got the food, the energy, and the solid metals, and I'm sure silver will be included in that too. But see, that's the kind of currency I would say, yes, that seems very stable and very safe. I want those notes compared to a US dollar where they printed umpteen and exposed to, what, 70, 80 trillion in derivatives just in America. That little green piece of paper will eventually become a street vendor item for sale, made little pretty peacocks or phoenixes or whatever those were there. And the bullion boom, if you follow along with the average person who's becoming more aware, a $2,000 piece of gold is a little out of the range versus 2 or 3 ounces of silver, $50, $100. I'll take 4 ounces of silver, 5 ounces, depending on premiums. But what they're finding is the trickle in of the individual buying 1, 5, 10 ounce bars is starting to drain the system. Like the COMEX, they're starting to run out of silver. They will be totally out of warehouseable silver somewhere in March of this year if the trend continues. Of 2023, excuse me. I'm still thinking into the next 2 weeks here. Happy New Year. So the thing that's really setting it off when we come into 2024, and I think the elites kind of understand this, the cosmic changes, the spiritual changes we're experiencing, the cognitive changes. This Uranus, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, are going to start looping in and creating their own second magnetic field. Now that is going to be a toroid loop, and then we have the sun and then the earth in the center of that. Now that's in October of 2024. So the massive earth changes inbound that we're about to see in a second looping magnetic field, there should be an uptick January, February, March when we get locked into this magnetic window, for a better term. Look for an increase in volcanoes for sure. You're going to start to see a lot more magmatic eruptions such as this one here in Hawaii. And Kilauea and Mauna Loa are both erupting at the same time right now. These types of eruptive events are going to continue. I'm really looking for a very large VEI 6 or 7 to combine with then the Tonga eruption. And if we get that, it'll be a runaway year without a summer. It'll take 5 years to come back. Population would plummet on the planet. If you see that, you need to run immediately and buy a greenhouse and grow lights. So this is the flooding that was in Pakistan. If you think about it, if this was previously a lake bed area where there was some crustal deformation where this would have then pushed back, you could see why it was a cradle of civilization. Now these areas are starting to refill again. The amount of flooding coming down in different parts of the world is astounding. Jeddah over in Saudi Arabia, 3 years worth of rain in 6 hours. And these are the types of storms that are upticking. This is Saudi Arabia flooding tremendously. And it seems the new benchmark that we've reached is 1 inch per hour is the extreme storm rate. Death Valley filled up 8 hours, 8 inches of rain. Italy, 6 inches of rain in 6 hours, massive flooding. So we're going to see all these things in tandem roll together, including the electrical activity above our heads in the aurora. So it is magnetically based. Electromagnetism is driving the show. You're going to be distracted the whole way. I do appreciate you joining me today. You can do your own research. I hope you can use those slides to find your own way through this chaos, because we're all in it together. And I'll see you next week. Bye for now.